Hey y'all. We're going to talk today, we're going to continue the conversation since Gina was the fictional sysadmin that hates her job. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about, if you get in that situation, how do you know how long you should stay in the job? You hate your job, should you stay? Should you leave your job every 3 years, like we heard in the last panel? What should we do? So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And the reason it's important, I want to just throw some stats out here. A very American stat that our Bureau of Labor Statistics says the average job for software work, average turnover in jobs for software workers is 4.2 years. So that's the average of how long people stay. It's a little bit longer in hardware companies than not. So, what's causing that turnover all the time? Is it because the job market's really hot and you can get a better job and more pay someplace? Or is it because we're all super stressed out and we're dealing with ice burn? So, does that sound interesting to talk about for a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay. Y'all want to talk about this? Yeah, okay. So what we're going to do, we're going to introduce the panel, and we'll just start with Theresa and go down, and please tell us who you are, where you work, what was the shortest time you stayed at a job, and what was the longest time. You don't have to say where, let's just get it going.
Theresa Miller, I'm with Go City. The shortest job was about a year, and the longest was 7.
This work at VMworld, shortest time of the year?
Longest?
I would say 8 years.
Hi, I'm Jim Jones. I currently this week work for a small government agency in West Virginia. As of next week, I will work for Allsite Data State as a senior cloud architect. My longest is my current role. I've been there almost 10 years, and my shortest was 3 months.
I'm Bill Sellers. I'm an infrastructure platform manager for Emad Younis, an insurance company you probably never heard of. Longest tenure at a company was 10 years. Shortest was just over 3.
Hi, my name is Lindy Collier. I'm with Rosenthal Technologies. The longest job I held was for 15 years, and the shortest job I held was for 5 months.
I'm Cody. I'm currently with Rackspace. The longest job I've had is almost 13 years now, my current role. And my shortest job was, I didn't even make it to the end of the first week.
Okay, I forgot to tell you guys, if you want to answer the questions we're going to ask the panel, you can go to slido.com, put in OA 2019. You can answer the questions too. If somebody else just ask a question, that's good. You can ask questions too, and I'll remember to let them and answer them. I didn't introduce myself. I'm Gina Rosenthal, G-Weeks on Twitter. My longest was, I think my longest was like 4 years, the shortest 4 months. So I want to go back and let's ask, why only 3 months? What happened there?
It was not a good role, so it was something that was taken in, it was a job that was taken in a situation where I was about to be out of a job, and luckily the employer that I'd left that was shutting down, the new company came and made my life better again, so it was time to get out. It was a culture fit.
Okay, so the culture was wrong, and you knew right away. And so, did you have a family at the time?
Wife, no children.
Okay, so if you knew you had kids that you would have changed your mind, or was...
No, that one needed to get out. So.
Let's get out. Yeah. You heard that on the last panel too, right? Like, you hate your job, leave. You'll find another job. How long did you say that?
I think it was like 6, 7 months. It was
the longest.
Oh, the longest. I had 15 years. So I started off in the meat industry. I went to school to be a food scientist. And I spent 15 years. What really did it for me was being on call 24/7. I had just had my daughter, and between being on call 24/7 and her waking up all hours of the night, I had to call it quits.
But why did you stay for so long? That's a long. What kept you hanging on to that job?
Delusional.
Okay, well, I'm gonna ask somebody else that's been a long time. Cody, you've been a long time at Rackspace, right?
Yeah.
How many years again?
It'll be 13 in March.
Okay. So that's a really long time, especially in a pure tech role. So how many different jobs at Rackspace have you had?
Yes. So for the last bunch of years, like I've had a job title, but not really a well-defined job role. It's been kind of whatever whatever the team needed. And prior to that was Windows sysadmin, and then I was one of the first few members of our VMware team. We were building out a VMware product, and so it's been a weird, wonderful adventure along the whole route there.
So what has kept you stay? Why have you stayed for so long?
A couple of things. There's a thing that gets tweeted out every so often. Like people don't leave companies; they leave managers. And the team lead I've had for the last 7 years has been beyond amazing. I had some family drama going on. My grandparents were passing. He ran interference for basically 2 years while I dropped off from that. And I don't know of any other role or any other team lead where I could have done that. So, and throughout the entire thing, I've been really well taken care of.
So you have a good organization. You don't really have a job title, so it sounds like you get to do what you want.
No. It's because I've been there for 13 some odd years, or 12 some odd years. I keep rounding it up because every now and then it starts to feel like it's getting really, really long. But yeah, it's because I've been there for a while. I've got some insider knowledge here, some insider knowledge there. I've been doing OpenStack for the past couple of years. Prior to that was VMware, prior to that was Windows, so you get drawn into things.
That's good. So that's probably, I want to transition into a different type of questioning, because I know myself included. How many of you on the panel have made a transition from a customer to a vendor? Oh, it's just two. All right. So, Emad, I'll start with you. What made you, was the customer job was a really long job? How long were you there?
Yeah, so 8 years as a customer.
So, what made you want to leave that job, and why did you decide to come to vendor?
So at the time, I stayed that long because of my kids. Right, I needed the stability, I needed the flexibility. So I stayed, because they were able to provide that for me. Once my kids were old enough and I was able to start working, then I did.
And how did you feel about making that change? You started to make the change? Because we hear Cody saying 13 years sounds like it's getting a little long, but he likes it, and he's okay there. And it sounds like you were okay there, but you were okay with the stability. So what kind of things did you have to think through about, your family responsibilities and then your personal growth, things like that?
So it came down to talking to people in the community, asking about, okay, hey, I'm thinking about this kind of role. How do you perceive that, and what's your day-to-day like? Just kind of understanding when I make this transition, how is that going to look in my life? How's that going to affect my kids? Things like that. So once I got comfortable asking some folks, I went ahead and plugged in. Kind of like Cody says, you kind of just jump in both feet, and here I am.
And I'm glad you did it.
Yeah, haven't looked back since.
Cody, do you want to say something else?
Yes, I am barefoot. And if there's usually a follow-up question, yes, my toenails are also painted.
I think that's awesome. So I think that's really interesting. How about you? Because you came from a customer. You're at a vendor now. What kind of process did you go through your head in deciding that you wanted to pursue that, or did it just happen? How did that happen to you?
So I spent 20 plus years in IT technical roles, hands-on tech, but on the side, so I have a website, 24/7 IT connection, a community site. In addition to that, on the side, I was doing a lot of evangelism for various companies. And after a while, I actually worked at a really great company before I started another really great company. It was just something was missing from my day job, and it was that ability to evangelize. So similar to Emad, I started talking to people that I knew in the community, where I could find a role where I could have that externally facing presence and take it to the next level as part of my day job.
So, Jim, I want to go to you because you're in the middle of a job transition. So, somebody come on. You guys make sure you put the microphones close to us. So why did you, if you're comfortable sharing it, how did you get to the point where you're like, I've got to find a different role, and how did you pick the role that you're going to?
Well, so believe it or not, a large part of me is actually this. So, where I'm leaving is a great job, and the reality of it is I live in a small area. As an IT worker, there's not a lot there, and I started coming to events like this and kind of being community focused about 5 years ago. And the more comfortable I got in it, the more my cultural need for how an organization can be started diverging from how the organization likes to run itself. So the last couple of years have been a little frustrating, and now that kind of goes away.
So let's dig into that a little bit, because that's actually very interesting. So do you think, because you're saying you started noticing that things should be different at the organization you're leaving?
Yeah, so one of the challenges of working in the public sector is different. There is typically a requirement to not say anything good or bad about anyone when it comes to vendors that you deal with and such like that. Now, we all have our opinions. I also like to blog, I like to tweet, I like all those fun things. And it's not much fun when you get pulled into the executive director's office and get smacked down for the tweet you sent 30 minutes ago. So, it's just one of those, it could be nothing.
Yeah, it's happened to all of us. So that's really great. So I want to ask the question that I see up on the Slido as well. So, because we're talking about everybody's making these moves, we're happy, we moved into it, we figured out how to do it, we talked to people in the community, it sounded good to us, it sounded like our families were cool, we're happy where we are, we're going to stay. This question up on Slido says, what if you make a career change that from the outside looks like the right move, but you hate it? Would you rather take a career step backwards to be happy again? And I'm going to start, you want to talk about this. I'm going to ask you first.
So, I can't really talk to not being happy with the move, and the move for me actually worked out really well. But I'm watching coworkers who are in that sort of situation as they advance in their career. As a technologist, you get into the weeds, you really enjoy that sort of thing, and then to progress financially or within an organization, usually that means stepping out of your technology into management and into things that you may not be naturally gifted at. And so that I've seen that. And it's a challenge for certain personality types. And I think the right choice is, yes, you should always try to fit your next role to what you're naturally inclined to do. And if that's deep technologist, then stay deep technologist. And there are roles where you can advance that. And you may have to go to another organization to do that, to go deep. Like Jim was talking about, when you see things that aren't right in your organization. But, it definitely is one of those things that you need to make sure that it's a fit for you.
Okay, anybody else want to talk to that question?
Yes.
Go, Theresa.
So I'm going to start by asking a question to that question. So I think you have to define what backwards means. Because that could mean, is it a financial step backwards? Maybe that is part of it, but if you are getting a little bit more balance and happiness in your life out of it, to have that temporary change, could be a long-term benefit. I've actually personally been in this situation. I was miserable at a job, burned out from IT, 24/7 on-call support forever. And I did have to make this tough decision. And I did take a financial step backwards, but I took a huge personal well-being step forwards. And back running and much happier.
Hey, let me ask you guys something. Is it hard to hear from you guys too? Hey, everybody in the back, could y'all please be quiet? Thank you. No, I'm serious. Thank you. It was really hard to hear.
Thank you.
Alright, so just to sum up, we're talking about that going backwards idea. Backwards is relative, is what Teresa's saying. What does backwards mean? If you go backwards and you make less money, but then you're around your family and you don't feel like killing everybody all the time, is that really backwards? It's kind of what you have to judge with all of this. I'm going to get to the question up there, but I want to go to the IT burnout idea, right? Because I think that, and the other thing I want us to talk about before we're done, because we've talked a little bit about this, is the other thing I want to talk about is just, do you have to go move every 3 years to keep your skills fresh and keep getting your money up? Emad's shaking his head, so when I come back to it, you're the first one to answer. But I wanted to, so I can read this. I wanted to talk about what really is the definition of burnout. The psychological definition is this. It's a psychological syndrome emerging as a prolonged response to chronic interpersonal stressors on the job. The three key dimensions of this response are an overwhelming exhaustion, feelings of cynicism and detachment from the job, and a sense of ineffectiveness and a lack of accomplishment. So, I mean, how many of you guys have felt that? How about out there? How many of y'all have felt that? How many of y'all have left your job to get away from that feeling? Okay. So before we ask the sales, then we've got a couple of different questions, which is good. I want to go back because Emad was shaking his head, right? So do you have to change your job? Because that was in the last panel we heard Tim say it, and I think I've heard that a lot too, that you should change your role or your job every 3 months to keep your skills fresh, to boost your salary up. 3 years, sorry. I'm really sorry. Is that what you're shaking your head?
So I think it depends, right? I think it depends on what you're looking for as far as career growth, right? So when I was on the customer side, I was lucky. I got to play and touch with everything, right? So from hardware to storage to DNS to Active Directory. So for me, it was a fulfilling role, right? Coming over to the vendor side, or even when I was a partner, I didn't get a chance to play with all the tech. So for me, I struggled a little bit with that because I was used to touching everything and understanding how all the pieces came together and all the new tech. So, I got to geek out and nerd a little bit about that. So I think, for me, I didn't need to change a job every 3 years, and that's why I was there for 8 years, was because I was learning enough to keep me interested, right? For some folks, maybe, the job role itself is confined, because I've been in those roles where, okay, you only are allowed to deploy VMs. That is your sole purpose in life. If I had to do that for, the next 5 years, yes, I would definitely look for a job or jump off a bridge, whichever came first. So I think, again, it really depends on the role and what they offer you.
How about anybody else want to join in on the 33 years?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it definitely hasn't been the case because I've been fortunate to work for two privately owned companies, and the dynamics are different. We're able to get good projects, and so we're able to do good technical projects, and that keeps things moving forward. The position I was in for 10 years, I had 3 different titles as I progressed through. But similar to Jim, I kind of saw problems when it came to events like this versus what we were doing in practice. There wasn't alignment, and there was a better way of doing things.
So let me ask you this, because you were okay with 10 years, that's right. So because you were moving roles and responsibilities, learning new things, that seemed to be an important thing for Emad. So is that for you guys? Was it because you were intrinsically motivated to stay with this job? It was feeding something inside of you, and it was okay, and you could stay, or was it because of your family's instability? Like, what was the dividing line?
So a little bit of both. Similar to Jim, I kind of tapped out the area that I was in. I was in a small market, and so there wasn't a lot of choice. So we made the choice to move to Charlotte, to a larger market, and there's been much more opportunity there. But having the family, having the responsibilities definitely kept me there. But there was a sense of pride with the work we were doing in the job.
So, I think that from my perspective, staying at my job in a sales role, if I would flip jobs every 3 years, I wouldn't get to know my customers. So I come at it from a different perspective. But also at the same time, I think that from leveling up my technical acumen, I can see where every 3 years being fresh on the job. And I know a lot of people who do that, take that work a job for 3 years, take a sabbatical, and then they come in and they're fresh for a new employer, and they're always literally leveling up their careers.
Yeah, so I'm kind of like what they're talking about. So early part of my career, until I got to my current role, I never hit the set 2-year anniversary in a year. So when I got to this one, Cody said, you don't quit you quit a job and you can sometimes love your manager. So that was me. Mine gave me all the freedom to learn and to grow and to do all the things that were necessary. So I didn't feel a need to get out until the organizational issues started to really rare. And frankly, probably the IT burnout layering over top of that. It could be a combination of a lot of things.
That's really because of your growth from your stories, but it sounds like you grew, you could see problems and didn't have a way to resolve the problems.
Yeah, and it was just, like I said, when you're in the kind of role where you get to touch everything, sometimes that touch everything continues to grow out and grow out and grow out, and you get to a point where, my God, there's nothing in this place that I'm not in charge of. And I'm like, okay, we got to figure out how to fix a little bit of that. Lots of things are fun, but way too many things are fun.
That's right, I'm the only person that has Theresa.
So I have a relatively short answer to the question. I don't think 3 years has anything to do with your ability to grow in your career. I think personally I grew the most in the role that I stayed at in 7 years. It's really about how you feel from a challenge perspective. Are you being challenged enough? And if you are, then you don't have to switch jobs. If leadership is supportive, you don't have to switch jobs. So I think that's why we've heard so many different answers here today.
So I think, as far as the burnout, I think, it's kind of all in your hands, right? Jim just said, if you touch everything in your environment, at some point you kind of become the guy who knows everything, and, you feel like you have to be involved in everything, but the reality is you don't need to be involved in everything, right? We have that OCD in some of us that we just feel like we do need to be involved. We need to, touch everything, but you don't, and you actually need to sometimes take that step back and teach the next guy, right? So that way you can kind of let that burnout fall on them or whatever. But sometimes I feel like it's self-induced more than anything.
I think I agree with you. We'll come back to Cody.
I was going to say, to that point specifically, opening acts, the Deep Brown Bag podcast, and so forth, I was getting burnt out, and at the first the expert party, way the heck back, I was complaining very loudly, very not the most pleasant language, and Damian Carlson tapped me on the shoulder and says, hey, I think I can help. And here we are all today, because I needed outside influence to take that step back, but once I did, the community took it and blew up and grew it.
I think that's awesome.
And it's not career specific, but that is, extracurricular can cause burnout also.
Well, I think going back to what Emad said, I think that it is career specific, and I think it is related to IT burnout, that we do it to ourselves, and it's good that Damon was able to come and tap you on the shoulder and get you out of it, but I think also just, why do you think we're like that? Because it seems like it's a very ops specific thing. I mean, because all of us can, how many of you guys can speak to you have to touch everything to make sure nobody breaks it, that it goes absolutely perfect? So I think, why are we like that?
That's what you mean. I don't know. I think sometimes, we can, I'm sure everybody's sitting here on the panel, we can have one task and you'll come up with 7 or 8 different ways to do it. Now, is my way the right way? Probably not, but if I can check all the requirements, if it meets all the requirements, then we should be good, right? But Theresa here may say, well, have you thought about it from this perspective, right? So everybody kind of brings a different perspective to it, and I think we just kind of need to be open-minded to say, okay, it's not there's multiple ways to do one thing, and it doesn't always have to be my way.
Anybody want to comment?
So for me, I transitioned to management. Let's start there. That's forced me to kind of step back from hands on keyboard and really start building into the team that I'm building. And so I have to communicate differently with them. And what I've discovered is how we get to the goal is not as important as getting to the goal and empowering them and giving them autonomy and mentoring them, building into them. And I think everybody up here is a product of the community here that is built into all of us. You know, for me personally, folks like Scott Lowe, Matt Simmons, Bob Clankers, those were people who were people that built into my early career, and because of them, I learned things and avoided mistakes, and then other people like Zito and others who kind of built into over the years. So my challenge for you would be, who are you mentoring, who are you building into? Because when you teach something, when you give to someone else, it's rewarding to you. That's another way of leveling up and making sure that you're building skills, because building to someone else because someone's building into you.
Right. It sounds like you have a different skill set now that you're a manager of people versus technology person.
So I'm trying to develop that, and it's not necessarily natural to develop that. But my natural inclination is to be territorial over my things. But the transition to a new role 3 years ago, nothing was mine. I hadn't built it from the ground up. I inherited a lot of systems that were already well built, well maintained, so I didn't feel that ownership over it, and it kind of helped me transition out of that territorialness and into this sort of, let me build into someone else. Let me help somebody else along their career path as well.
And that's what it sounds like. Maybe you got that from the community as well, which is very different. We always talk about getting these technical skills from the community, but you're talking about being in the managerial role now, and you've got those skills at the starting point from those from being in the community. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's because people gave freely, and that's one of the great things about this community is so many people blog, so many people do podcasts and share information. And that really is critical to my personal development, especially when I was isolated in a smaller market, and could only get this kind of thing at big events.
Pretty awesome. So let's move forward of the questions again, and then I'm going to get very specific about what should people do, what advice you have. So this is very specific. So has anyone on the panel gone from my customer side to the sales side? You kind of have. So what's the pros and cons of leaving being a customer, or maybe very hands-on technical, like we've been talking, to being sales and jumping into a sales role? Yes. So if you feel comfortable, yes.
For me, from the sales perspective, I think what I'm encountering right now is, how do I want to say this? People just aren't honest. And it's tough being in a sales role. I think probably more so than in this industry than anyone. You spend months and months and months cultivating, a design and, a strategy and a solution for a customer, and then at the last hour, boom, they decide not to do it. And it's devastating, and it's such a shot to your ego. I mean, it's the most frustrating thing that I've ever experienced in my life. And it's one of those things where you kind of have to take a step back and evaluate, is, the juice worth the squeeze? And I think that, if you're really thinking about making that change, really evaluate what you're doing and really, lean on the community and find out, what the pros and cons are of yourself. Because, you may think that the grass is greener on the other side, and it may not be.
I think that's a great answer, because you came from a technical role to sales.
Kind of, sort of, yes.
And you're still technical.
Yeah.
Kind of, sort of, yes.
The one thing I will say, though, is that, this community is beyond anything I've ever experienced in my life. And I think everyone on this panel has said that. To podcasts, to, the Brown Bag, to, the Hello from My Home Lab that I get to host. The things that everyone in this community provides. Any of you guys can be up there on the stage. One of the things I had just heard from a colleague that I was working with, he made a comment to me. He's like, never discredit what you do in your side hustle of being your main hustle. And I think that's kind of really resonated with me to really kind of evaluate where I want to go next in my career.
That's an interesting question. Okay, so I will not put you on the spot anymore, but let's see if I can ask this question away from this panel. So somebody's asking about if you want to be pre-sales, should you be engineering first or should you be sales? I really don't understand where that question is coming from. On a pre-sales role, is it better to come from engineering or from sales? Anybody want to weigh in on that? I don't think we've got any pre-sales people on this. I'll have to leave that for the next panel. So we'll pass it on to the next panel. What I want to ask you guys, though, let's be really, really specific. I think you kind of kicked this off already. What are the negatives to staying in a job? What are the negatives to staying for a really long time in a job? Let's just go. And give me the negatives and what's the positives to staying.
The negatives, I think, would be if you don't challenge yourself in your role, you could get caught in a rut, right? Where you're not actually building anything more of your knowledge, you're not learning anymore. That would be the biggest negative I would foresee.
What would be the biggest positive to stay for a long time, 7 years?
You could then become like the subject matter expert, go to the lead, you really could take that the opposite direction and be one to really empower those around you.
What do you think?
So negatives, to me, in any role, if I'm not growing, if I don't feel stimulated, then that's a big negative, right? It's time to either have that chat with my manager, and if they can't satisfy that need internally, then it's time to go ahead and look for something else extra.
So I think that's a really good piece of advice, actually. So if you're not happy, talk to your management and see if something can happen before you completely abandon all hope. But if you have to abandon all hope, get out of there.
Pretty much.
So what would be the benefits of sticking around for a decade or so in a job?
So at least from my perspective, I think if you're working with a great team, it starts to become more like a family. So there's a positive there, and kind of like what Cody stated earlier on is you have people to lean on, right? And you know that they have your back versus where you're just kind of a number somewhere.
Yes. So from the negative standpoint, you get the institutional influence the longer you stay in a situation, and you might find yourself changing, who you are. Sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. It depends based on where you're at. You get assimilated into the board. That's cool, but if as long as it's good, From the positive standpoint, it can be forever. As long as I think Emad and I are both in the same situation. If you're in a long-term situation where they allow for growth, great, that's awesome. You also have to take into account other things. Retirement type situations, vacation situations, work-life balance, all these kind of things. Frankly, the longer you're in a place, the more, it's like anything else, the more those things will smooth out for you. Work-life balance, so who here started a job and you feel like your hair on fire for the first 6 months? That's cool for 6 months. That's not cool for 6 years.
Just shave your hair. That'll solve everything.
I think they're asking you the salary compression. If you stay in a job too long, it's easy to get devalued. And it's hard sometimes, especially for technologists, introverts, to go and ask for what you're worth, or to articulate what you're worth. I think that's happened in my career path, unfortunately. You get a chance to kind of go out to market and see what you're worth if you're seeking new employment. On the good side, I stayed for 10 years at a telephone company, and they were like family. They still are like family. We still text and joke. It's something where we really cared for each other through funerals, baby showers, and whatever. We lived life together. And it was a great group of people. So it really did become my family.
It's awesome. I think the point you made about salary and making sure we talk to our management how to do that. That is what the next panel is about. So that'll be interesting to see some specific advice on that. Negatives for staying and positives for staying. And negatives for leaving. What did I say? You know what I mean?
Yes. I think that the negatives and positives can be basically the same thing. It's your brand equity within the company. You become that subject matter expert where everybody leans on you and you feel as if you have to answer the questions, and then your priorities get misaligned. But also at the same time, it's a positive because you could be that force of change within your organization. If you've been there long enough, and as long as you're open to change, and as long as you're open to learning, and you're making that impact upon your company, I think that by staying a longer period of time can be good.
So, Cody.
Positives and negatives. Negatives are, you get stagnant. You end up with a lot of institutional inertia. You start to see everything through the lens that you've been looking through for all these years. So to combat that, you come to events like this, or you hop on a podcast, or so forth. You have friends that do hop around every 3 or 4 years that let you know, hey, your salary's getting a little out of whack, or hey, you seem like you're a little bit more burnt out. Or maybe your tweets you seem a little angrier than usual. Can I help?
I've never heard that.
Positives, for me, the biggest positive has been the stability, so when I first came on Rackspace, I was still the age where you bring your parents to your first real, adult job. And afterwards, I took them out to lunch and they're like, we were uncomfortable with you moving to Texas for work, but you found your people. You found a company, a building full of people that will understand that, and it took me years to actually understand what my director tried to tell me there.
You found a good place to be. That's really good. So there was another question up there, but I had to leave it. But it was a good one, so I'm going to throw it out to everybody so whoever wants to take it. The question was, fine if you leave, because salary side, that's one thing. But what if you're not getting education credits? They won't let you come to the conferences like VMworld. They don't, support anything new. So the question was, what do you value besides salary? When you're thinking about, is it time to go? Can I stick with it because I want to be in this place? What besides salary is important to you?
It's another one of those personal decisions, right? So to me, if someone wasn't going to allow me to go to events and educate myself through training, personally, I would move on. Anything else? I think
that's a pretty easy one, I think, for people to think about. What kind of other things would be important to keep here?
I think culture is probably much more important than any of that. I've worked in some pretty toxic environments and dealt with some pretty toxic people, and it's just not fun. Life is just way too short to deal with all of that, and if that's how the culture is going to be and they're not going to do anything about it, then I would also move on.
I think that if you're making that transition or you're thinking about making that transition, the first question that anyone should ask is from a potential new employer, is what are you going to do for my education? Are you going to let me come to the different tech events? Are you, because if they're not, even if the salary was 20% more than what you're making, I would really reevaluate whether or not I would take that position, because not being part of a community and not having that opportunity to do so, I think would be something that would be a definite deal killer for me.
Yeah. So I will say, I don't like to have a conversation about salary. I like to have a conversation about compensation. One thing that I've found as I've got older, money is nice, but my most valuable resource is actually time. So I need that time to be happy, terrific, the culture push. I need that time to be excited. So I need that challenge. So that's a massive part of it for me. And frankly, I also just need the time. I'm married to my wife 20 years next month, and I have a 7-year-old daughter. I like to do those things.
So I would also challenge my company doesn't allow me art. So I know of at least 2 or 3 folks here from the Atlanta VMworld that company didn't sponsor it. They came, community managed to find them a pass, community managed to find them airfare. They're maybe bunking up with somebody else in the hotel. So if it's important to you, yes, ask your work, ask your manager, ask your employer. And if they say no, and it is still very important to you, maybe you find PTO to burn. Maybe you ask your significant other and the rest of your family, hey, do you mind if I go out here for some personal development for a week or so? But, having little kids, the permission thing it really works.
So I would say that your career is in your hands, right? No one's going to come and spoon feed you anything. You have to kind of take that initiative. So I agree with Cody. If there's something that's important to you, whether it's going and getting training or coming to a conference, then you need to find that way if they won't allow you, right? And we've seen it over and over again where people have gotten sponsorship. Even if you've got to pay out of your own pocket, if you feel that that's important as an investment for your career, then it's going to pay off, right? So I would say don't let anything stop you from investing in you and moving forward in your career. I would say also develop some sort of roadmap for your career. The getting there may have some challenges and it may not be what you envisioned, but if you stick to it, eventually you'll get there.
I think all of that's really good advice. I know, I can remember when all of this started, and I know some on a big level, Stu and some other folks, we all saw this start, a while ago. So for me, and we've heard it on this panel, we've heard it on the panel previously, this community is an amazing way to learn, an amazing place to find mentors, an amazing place to find your next role, to get advice on your next role, where you should go and what you should do. So this is one of those things that if it's with whatever you have to do to stay connected to this community, it's worth more than I think any of us really realize. It really is. So it's almost like a job perk, and if the company doesn't understand it, for me that turns into a culture thing, because I don't know, if I couldn't blog and tweet, I couldn't work someplace. That's going to be a bad culture fit for me personally, because I have to talk about what I'm passionate about.
Yeah, it's values. So, I took the opportunity when I was looking for a new role, and I actually got some bad advice from a colleague, previous colleague. She said, you might not want to put your book, and you might not want to put your blog or your resume. I'm like, hell no. That's exactly what's going to go on my resume, because I want to land somewhere that values that. I want that to be part of their core values. So my current manager is a VMworld leader. We are very much into the whole community, and recommends that we do the same thing. So whether that's mentoring in schools, doing programs like that, that's part of the core values of the organization that I'm in today.
I think that's a fantastic point, that important to you to be able to blog. Put it on your resume as a beacon, like, I'm going to do this is what I do. You probably don't want me, and we're not going to fit. I think that's really good. All right, so we've got about 6 minutes, so we're going to wrap it up. I will leave it, let's go down, leave a final thought for everybody that's listening, and also, promote anything you'd like to promote. Theresa, you go first.
So, my challenge to you when it comes to career would be to really step back and reflect on what's important to you. I'm going to go back to culture being really one of the number one things you should be looking at when you make your next career move. And be transparent about what you're doing, like the blogging and things like that, because it should be, if that's important to you, it should be important to them. And then I still want to plug my
too. It's awesome.
Yeah, we get out there. There's somebody who writes something new every week, so check it out.
Right, how about you? Words of wisdom for the crowd, and then plug anything you would like to.
Words of wisdom. I think I said it already. I think, like I said, your career is in your hands. At the end of the day, when you retire, you want to look back and feel like you did everything you could to get where you wanted to be. So if money is your motivator, then by all means go chase it. If learning new things is your motivator, then go chase it. But just make sure you have fun doing it. Make sure you enjoy doing it. Make sure that you're in a culture that helps promote you and gets you to where you want to be. And if you don't feel that way, then go find something new and exciting, right? So that's kind of the way I look at it. As far as something to promote, I have a couple of sessions here at VMworld, I think 3, so go check them out. I'm speaking with William Lamb. We got 2 sessions. We're going to talk about hybridity and workload mobility. And then I have a couple of vCenter sessions, one on life cycle. So if you have issues upgrading your vCenter server, that'll be the session for you. And then the last one is about architecture for vCenter server as well.
Thank you. Before we get to you, there's another request to keep it down, y'all, so please. Inside this. Or take conversations. Jim.
Yeah, so it's cliche as hell, but the way I think about it is to encapsulate what Emad said, is find your why. Find why you do what you do and why you want to do. And if where you're at doesn't fit it, go. Do that thing, do what makes you happy. We only have such a finite period of time on this earth, it's not worth it to be unhappy with it. So yeah, that's...
What would you like to promote?
So I've got a website. It'll actually have new blog content now. It's been a while. So it's kool-aid.info.
Alright, words of wisdom and promote something.
Words of wisdom, don't stop moving. Find a way to continue to just develop yourself, build into yourself, spend some time. And to tag along with that, I'll promote Big Brown Bag. These guys do an amazing job. These guys do an amazing job providing content for us as a community, and I've been tremendously blessed by the content so many of the people. So, I'll promote that.
Excellent.
Words of wisdom. I encourage everyone here to meet somebody new this week. Reach out of your comfort zone if you're an introvert and you don't know. Encourage you guys to go to the VMworld party tonight, join VMworld. I don't work for VMworld, but definitely meet somebody new this week and exchange emails, whatever, because that's how the community continues to grow. Things to promote. The ladies! Definitely support. If you know women in technology who aren't coming to technical events, get them there. That's the biggest challenge I have for each and every person in this room. Because as you can tell, we're the minority. So, slogan on the back of the shirt, creating lines to the restaurant since 2018. Let's make it happen. And then the last thing, hello from my home lab. If you have a home lab and you'd like to get it displayed and you're using Emad Advantage, definitely hook up with, don't hook up with me, but talk to me and let's get you on a webcast.
So words of advice is just get started. Like if you're hesitant about something, about having that salary conversation or changing roles or interviewing or whatever, just do it. Right? The consequences to having a bad interview are maybe you just don't interview there again in the next couple of years. Right? But put your resume out there, get on LinkedIn, whatever. Have that conversation. So in 12 years, I've never not been on LinkedIn. I've never not been taking interviews from the outside. Right? Things to promote.
Come on, Cody.
I knew this answer when I got started.
So, I just want to say this was like a great panel with such good advice, and I love that it all comes back to you and what's important to you and your culture, and it also ties back to the community. And I can't believe this community is going this strong all these years later, and I'm so proud of it and so proud to be part of it. I work for VMware. If you find anything we talk about tomorrow interesting, come find me and I can connect you to the people you want to talk to. One of them sitting right here.
I know nothing.
I will connect you to them. I will find somebody that will talk to you. So it's because it's going to be a really interesting VMworld, and I'm super stoked about it. So.
Yeah, I would say definitely go and check out the announcements tomorrow morning. There's going to be some pretty cool things.